Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. We are right now in the midst of the biggest scandal at the Department of Justice since Watergate in the 1970s. So far, 7 prosecutors have quit the DOJ in protest of Trump's corrupt deal with New York City's Democratic Mayor Eric Adams. In what can really best be described as a blatant quid pro quo, the charges in Mayor Adams' federal bribery case have been conditionally dropped for now in exchange for his full cooperation with Trump's plans for immigration enforcement and mass deportation in New York City. Now, yesterday, 6 career prosecutors, people who signed up to work for Donald Trump, resigned rather than help facilitate such obvious corruption by dropping the charges. This morning, a 7th DOJ official, a man named Hagen Scotton, the lead prosecutor on the case, joined them. In a letter to Trump's acting Deputy Attorney General, Emil Bovee, Scotton called the deal with Mayor Adams a serious mistake, and he insisted that no system of ordered liberty can allow the government to use the carrot of dismissing charges or the stick of threatening to bring them again to induce an elected official to support its policy objectives, adding that any assistant U.S. attorney would know that our laws and traditions do not allow using the prosecutorial power to influence other citizens, much less elected officials, in this way. If no lawyer within earshot of the president is willing to give him that advice, then I expect you will eventually find someone who is enough of a fool or enough of a coward to follow your motion. But it was never going to be me. The formal filing to drop those charges was finally submitted about an hour ago following an intense pressure campaign by the man you see there, Emil Bovee, to find lawyers at the DOJ's Public Integrity Office, that's the folks that prosecute public corruption, that would be willing to sign the requisite motion. Now, he finally convinced a trial lawyer near retirement, as well as a supervisor at the criminal division, to agree. But here's the thing, a judge still needs to sign off on the whole thing. Now, we should say Mayor Eric Adams denies the charges against him, insists his deal with DOJ was totally above board. In a statement today, he did not explicitly deny a quid pro quo, but he did deny any trade of my authority as your mayor for an end to my case. But even that denial is difficult to square with the language that Bovee himself used in his initial letter demanding the Southern District of New York drop the pending charges against Mayor Adams so that he can, quote, devote full attention and resources to the illegal immigration that escalated under the policies of the prior administration. Now, Bovee obviously understands how that could sound like, well, a quid pro quo, which is why he went out of his way to add a very funny footnote, preemptively insisting it is not one, citing an earlier memo from SDNY. As Mr. Bovee clearly stated to defense counsel during our government, the government is not offering to exchange dismissal of a criminal case for Adams' assistance on immigration enforcement. Perish the thought. Where'd you get that idea? Except federal prosecutors literally asked the judge to dismiss the case against Mayor Adams. Everyone can see what's going on here. Of course, this all started earlier this week when Danielle Sassoon, she was Trump's pick to serve as the acting U.S. attorney for SDNY. She's a prosecutor with sterling credentials among conservatives, clerked for Scalia. She, in response to being ordered to drop the case, sent a letter offering her resignation directly to the Attorney General Pam Bondi, right, bypassing Bovee, who'd sent her this instruction, writing that Adams' attorneys repeatedly urged what amounted to a quid pro quo, indicating Adams would be in a position to assist with the department's enforcement priorities only if the indictment were dismissed, adding, rather than be rewarded, Adams' advocacy should be called out for what it is, an improper offer of immigration enforcement assistance in exchange for a dismissal of his case. In that same letter, Sassoon outlines a particularly damning anecdote in which Bovee admonished a member of my team who took notes during that meeting with Adams' lawyers and directed the collection of those notes at the meeting's conclusion. Like, why are you writing things down, lawyer from the Justice Department? Probably worth stressing here, it's standard practice for prosecutors to take notes in a meeting like this, and that demanding them refrain from doing so and then confiscating their notes is not a sign that everything you're doing is on the up and up. Bovee responded to Sassoon's letter with a blustery 8-page letter of his own yesterday, where he admonished her for refusing to drop the charges, accused her of participating in a partisan witch hunt against an elected Democrat. Bovee also mentioned by name 2 assistant U.S. attorneys under Sassoon who worked on the case and basically directed them to contact his office if they were willing to drop the charges. And it was one of those attorneys that he name-checked, Hagen Scotton, the guy I quoted a moment ago, who resigned today and told Bovee to go kick rocks. There's one more back and forth in letters between Sassoon and Bovee I think is worth highlighting because it sort of gets to the nut of the point, a perfect encapsulation of just how corrupt, how rotten this deal is that Trump is offering Mayor Adams. Sassoon, in her letter, invokes the case of Michael Flynn. That was Trump's former national security advisor in his last administration. And in short, Flynn was indicted for lying to the FBI. He pleaded guilty to the charges. Then Trump's DOJ, under Attorney General Bill Barr, demanded the charges be dropped anyway after he pleaded guilty. Now, the judge overseeing the case refused to dismiss it, but the whole thing eventually went away when Trump stepped in and simply pardoned Flynn on his way out of office. In her letter to Bovee, Sassoon points out that the president could just do the same thing now, noting that with Flynn, the president ultimately chose to cut off the extended and embarrassing litigation over dismissal by granting a pardon. Bovee responded to that with some more bluster, basically admonishing Sassoon for daring to question Trump's authority. Don't tell the president who to pardon. But let's linger here for a second, because that example raises an important point, right? All this is happening because Trump did not pardon Adams. In fact, we have reporting in the New York Times that Adams explicitly sent a letter asking for a pardon. He didn't get one. That kind of gives the game away, doesn't it? Because it's not as though this president is particularly shy about wielding his pardon power, considering that on day one he pardoned 1,600 January 6 rioters, including a bunch of folks who have since been rearrested for other crimes, others who committed violence. He pardoned the guy that was running like the biggest drug trafficking website in the world, pardoned him. Trump intentionally did not just pardon the mayor, which would be fully within his rights. Instead, what he chose to do was to dangle freedom in front of him in exchange for his preferred policy outcomes in New York City. The conditional dropping of the charges on a possibly temporary basis was the quid, right? Well, today, as all of this is developing, in the shadow of this scandal, today we got the quo. We got the quo when Mayor Adams went on a media tour, along with Trump's so-called border czar, where he was forced to insist he is a willing participant in Trump's immigration crackdown and deny the existence of any sort of shady dealings.
Think about my attorney, Alex Spira, one of the top trial attorneys in the country. Imagine him going inside saying that the only way Mayor Adams is going to assist in immigration, which I was calling for since 2022, right, is if you drop the charges. That's quid pro quo. That's a crime. It took her 3 weeks to report in front of her a criminal action. Right. Come on, this is silly.
Now, that denial, again, was a little undercut during that very same interview when Trump's border guy, sitting next to him on the curvy couch, issued a not-so-veiled threat against Adams if he doesn't do what the big boss wants.
I came to New York City. I wasn't going to leave up nothing. Right. I did the last time, and I told him I'm not leaving until I got something. And now I got him on the couch in front of millions of people. He can't back waving this now, right? If he doesn't come through, I'll be back in New York City, and we won't be sitting on the couch. I'll be in his office, up his butt, saying, "Where the hell is the agreement we came to?"
It's kind of like a buddy comedy, right? Everyone's laughing. We're going to deport a lot of people in New York City. You're going to get your charges dropped. It's pretty despicable, actually. It's one of the most corrupt dealings I've ever seen, certainly, I think, in the history of the modern Justice Department, and is playing out for all of us to see on morning television. Andrew Weissmann spent years serving the Department of Justice, including as the lead prosecutor in Special Counsel Robert Mueller's office. Paul Butler is a former federal prosecutor who served in the Public Integrity Unit of DOJ, which saw a number of staffers resign in protest this week. They join me now. Paul, let me start with you. Just a little bit of the DNA of that Public Integrity Unit in Main Justice where you served. I mean, this is a place that they exist to prosecute public corruption. We know yesterday a number of the deputies resigned rather than sign this order, and it looks like today a bunch of them refused to go along with it as well. Tell us about what is the sort of makeup of that unit?
So, Chris, when I served in the Public Integrity section, I was part of a team that prosecuted a Republican senator for corruption. We started that investigation in a Democratic administration, and it continued under a Republican administration. Nothing changed. Prosecutors in the public integrity section don't do politics. Our charge was to follow the Constitution, the law, and the evidence. Contrast that with this Justice Department, where in the order to dismiss the case against Adams, the Deputy Attorney General literally said, it's not based on the law, it's not based on the evidence in the case. It's all about politics. So it's probably legal that the Attorney General can threaten to fire line attorneys who don't go along with her will, but it's unethical. It violates the Justice Department manual, and it's expressive. It sends this message to every government employee that if they better go along to get along. If they cross Trump, not only do they risk losing their jobs, Chris, they risk being prosecuted themselves in Trump's newly weaponized Department of Justice.